before we start anything else, I just need to get this out of the way. People have been wondering what bandwagon I will be hopping on. And as you know, I have a vast collection of hats. So I figured I'd announce it with a hat.
Drum roll, please.
That's right. Women want me. Fish fear me. We're rebranding. This is now a fishing podcast. Welcome to Wicked Tougna, Episode 1. Play that new intro.
Women want me. Fish fear me. Baby, if you're headed to the kitchen, could you hear me? Women want me. Fish fear me. Just tapping on the glass. On the Wicked Tougna podcast.
All right, welcome to Wicked Tougna, Episode 1. Let's start with some warm-ups. All right, so, Tougie, originally known as the Patagonian toothfish. Fishermen renamed this fish to become more marketable to American consumers.
Well, DeJ, I'll tell you what I think about the fish, and I'll tell you, I'm gonna guess it's the ever elusive trout.
It is the Chilean sea bass, formerly known as the Patagonian toothfish.
Well, then
right.
I did learn something today. I didn't know Chile did anything else but make spices.
All right, question number 2. At 2,664 pounds, this species was the largest fish ever caught using a live porpoise as bait.
I'd like to phone a friend. Can I phone a friend?
You can.
I'd call my Uncle Jimmy, but I don't think he'd pick up. He's out on the lake right now. Let's go with the North Bay Doolin Narwhal.
Well, you could have phoned old Steven Spielberg because it is the great white shark.
Well, hot dang. I didn't know those things actually existed.
This common species of fish is the most eaten fish around the world.
I'm gonna go. Chicken of the sea.
That's right, it's the herring, the chicken of the sea. And our
There you
final
go.
question. This one's a little bit of a toughie, straight out of the mouth of Trebek. 66 million years after its extinction, in 1938, this fish was discovered to not be extinct.
I'm gonna go with the big mouth bass that sings on my wall.
Oh, real close. It's actually the coelacanth.
Yes, the old sea lion. Yes, I've heard of it.
And speaking of uncovering long-forgotten fossils, our good friends at Manscaped have a code for y'all to use. That's right, code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off your purchase. Uncover your long-forgotten fossils with the all-new Lawnmower 4.0. Manscaped, your balls will thank you.
That's what I've heard. I don't see how they wouldn't. All right, so fun fact, everybody. I had no idea that was going to happen. But, I see you've had some time on your hands since the incident.
Yeah, well, I've just been starting my country music career.
It's off to a great start. I mean, might I say you put a little bit too much effort into the rhyming. I think you could have gone full Florida Georgia line and really half-assed it, but still found success. So, at the end of the day, though, I do appreciate the effort that you put in there.
What can you do? Just women want me, fish fear me. Really, it's a creed that I like to live my life by.
Oh, we'll be talking about Creed later on, don't worry. But aside from that...
the Imagine Dragons curse reincarnates.
Oh, God. To reiterate, everybody, again, from what DeJ mentioned, one more time here throughout the month of May, we want to remind you again that this episode is brought to you by Manscaped. We thank Manscaped for sponsoring the show throughout the month of May. We certainly hope they'll be back with us very, very soon. A lot of positive responses, of course, not just to the lovely Lawnmower 4.0, but everything else that they have available at manscaped.com. Make sure to use Tougie20, not Tougie24, code Tougie at checkout for 20%. There you go. Off of your order and free worldwide shipping. And again, the lovely Lawnmower 4.0, the right tool for the job. Your balls will thank you. And we thank Manscaped one more time for sponsoring this particular show.
Make sure you keep
with that.
Clean bobbers in your tackle box.
We'll see how long Deej can keep up the fish puns. That said, Deej, we have a lot to talk about today in terms of the playoffs and everything going on. It is busy as always, but we do want to take some viewer questions. Our letters to the editors, that being us too. Now, this first one, we have not talked about the IIHF World Championship going on because there's not much to talk about, but screw it, this will be our little segment for it because this question comes from one Cody Freeman. With how Ben Bounds is performing at the IIHF tournament so far, do you think a team from the NHL or the KHL will sign him? Now, Deej, I know what you're saying. Who the hell is that? And I thought the same thing because, as mentioned, I have not paid attention to this tournament whatsoever. But a friendly reminder right now for what's going on in the IIHF tournament. Ben Bounds plays for Great Britain because, of course, he does, alongside great hockey names such as Jackson Whistle, Dallas Earhart, some of these names, by the way. Brett Perlini, is he related to Brendan? I'm pretty sure he is. Mark Garside, Lewis Hook, my favorite, Paul Swindlehurst. Paul, if you're available to get onto the show, please tell us. And who, of course, could forget the great Ross Venus. I will say shout out to their jerseys, though, for the IIHF. I also think Sheldon Keefe's brother, Adam, is an assistant coach on the team. I'm quite sure. So shout out to everything that Great Britain's doing at this tournament. But in the case of one Ben Bounds, allow me to say this. He has, in 4 appearances, I believe, 4 games, or maybe 5 at this point, he has a .928 save percentage, Deej. However, that is only good for 11th, I believe, in save percentage in this tournament, because you don't have the majority of NHL players involved like you normally would. Again, there are 10 people ahead of him. You might remember this name, Deej, I'm quite sure. Do you remember the lovely name Hari Sateri? I'm pretty sure.
Former Florida Panther.
Yeah, former Florida Panther Hari Sateri. He has a .966 save percentage.
He looked really good in like 3 or 4 starts.
Yeah, he has a .966.
Is he Team Finland's goaltender?
Yeah, he is Team Finland's starter. Their other goalie, another former, I think this guy had Jets rights. UC Olkinuora has a .933, also ahead of Ben Bounds. So I don't know how much, NHL teams especially will look into this tournament as kind of a measuring stick for how good somebody might be. Like if you're paying attention to the tournament and you see former NHLer Reto Berra with a .964 save percentage and a shutout in 2 appearances for Switzerland, you're going to be like, damn, that's pretty cool. But as we all know, and if you've even heard of the tournament in passing, you do have the instance of a lot of upsets, a lot of teams winning games where you're like, how are they going to win those? And again, it is the lack of NHLers. You'll see, Danny Taylor, former NHLer Danny Taylor is suiting up for Belarus because why not? The U.S. team includes.
I've never heard of Danny Taylor before.
Former Flame. I think he might have played for Ottawa as well. But like the U.S. team, for example, your top defenseman, legitimately, I think is Matt Roy of the LA Kings. Other notable names on that defense core, Christian Wolanin and Adam Clendenning. Chris Weidman as well, Matt Tennyson. It really kind of shows like what that team looks like. I mean, forwards, a lot of younger guys like Jack Drury, Jason Robertson, but also guys who it's like, I hope to get back into the league, such as Brian Boyle and Justin Abdelkader. Like, there's a reason why we haven't exactly talked about this tournament. I'm not saying it probably hasn't been interesting. I think it could be a very interesting thing, and I'll probably do it after the show to sit here and look at who's actually playing in this tournament. But for the most part, I can't say it's the most notable thing in the world, but for, that bit of extra hockey to pay attention to outside of the Stanley Cup playoffs, yeah, sure. But in terms of anything that's going to take up a lot of talking time and talking points on this show, probably not. So will a goaltender like Ben Bounds or Ben Bonds, whatever it is, get an opportunity? Maybe. But also factor in that Matthias Niederberger of Germany has a higher save percentage. So, hey, who's to say? But it is Great Britain. I'm glad Great Britain's doing well because, let's be honest, they are the biggest long shot. But it's also a tournament that includes Italy and Kazakhstan, so maybe not. Who the hell is on Team Italy? They might be the most obscure. Do they have all the names? Oh, the names. Everybody, your homework assignment is to go look at Team Italy on the IIHF website, which includes my favorite Italian, Daniel Frank. But also Nick Patan's brother, I believe, Alex Patan. I'm pretty sure. Hold on. Please tell me. Hold on. We're doing this. We're doing this live. Please tell me that's Nick Patan's brother. It is. So root for Nick Patan's brother on Team Italy. Go Italy. Go Italy. God, some of those names. I'm not even going to spoil them for you guys. Some of those names are just fantastic. DeJ, do you have any thoughts on the IIHF tournament before we move on?
Well, I guess if you look at the scoring, it's not great. I mean, you've got Liam Kirk is like one of the scoring leaders of the Sheffield Steelers. You've got, I believe, the highest. Like an NHLer isn't even leading the scoring. I believe Trevor Moore is tied for third in scoring with 6 points in 4 games. So, I mean, obviously, the IIHF this year is not a good measure of who's a good hockey player, who's not. I mean, we're talking about a tournament that once named Mike Matheson the defenseman of the tournament. But you mentioned Great Britain and how their hockey program has improved year after year. And I don't know if I've ever brought this up on the channel, but I'm a big fan of Chris Kibwe, hockey tutorial on YouTube. And he is a guy from Kenya that grew up in England. Mm-hmm. And he is a hockey fanatic. He's like sponsored by Bauer and STX, and they send him all sorts of hockey gear. And his whole goal is to get people from Kenya and the UK to play hockey. And he's been at it for 6-7 years. And I like to think in some way he's had an impact on this, which is really cool.
I've followed that particular channel for a long time. I will say, excuse me, one of my favorites being when they did DeJ, do you remember Crashed Ice? I think it is.
Yes, the Red Bull. It's the like Red Bull. You basically wear hockey gear and then fall down a roller coaster track. Essentially,
right. It's incredible if you guys haven't watched it, but they did an event in, I think, 2019 at Fenway Park, and he got to come over to the States for that, and they did an awesome video, a kind of behind-the-scenes look at Crashed Ice at Fenway. So, yeah, I've been a big fan of that channel for a long time. Shout out to Hockey Tutorial. Talk about someone who'd be interesting to have on a pod. I don't know if he's ever been on, like, a major podcast or anything like that from the States, but if he hasn't, that's a shame. I'm not even saying that to be like, hey, be on ours, but like, just in general, like, that's an interesting dude to hear talk about hockey.
He's a big Florida Panthers fan. I'll shoot him an email. He's got a series of 4 videos where he just lives at Aaron Ekblad's house for 4 days and like shows Aaron Ekblad's like backyard and how he trains and stuff. It's pretty crazy.
I somehow missed that. That is now must-see viewing alongside with the IIHF Italian roster. We'll move on here. A couple more questions. We're going to try to get right into the playoff talk as soon as we possibly can today, guys, because last episode we're like, yeah, hey, we got some talking points, and then the playoff talk just kept going, so we kind of learned our lesson. This is from Philar. And it's in fairness a question worth asking because it's a team we didn't really get to discuss all that much this season because, well, they weren't that good. Your thoughts on Bob Murray and Dallas Eakins coming back next year for Dallas? Now, I'll say this. The one time we did mention Anaheim this year was that, hey, they were like historically bad by Duck standards. And they were. I don't necessarily think like Bob Murray as GM, Dallas Eakins as head coach are the guys long term. But if you want to sit here and say that the Anaheim Ducks are in a bad way right now, I disagree. Did they suck this year? Yeah, but your team being horrible isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as there's a direction to it, as Buffalo Sabres fans will tell you. Anaheim, in terms of the prospects that they've already acquired, they'll have another top pick this year. They're in a really good spot. I mean, I'm someone who thinks, and don't worry, we'll get into talking about other goalies this year who I don't think can blame the team in front of them for their shortcomings. But, you know, John Gibson, there's been some concerns. Like, he might be that type of goalie where it's, well, unless the team in front of him is good, he's not elite. It's looking like that could be the case. You know, yes, the Ducks have fallen off. He's fallen off with them. There are some goaltenders. Their team's bad. They're still good. Goaltending's a weird thing. But you still have John Gibson. Obviously, this year, defensively, you saw Jamie Drysdale make the show. And, of course, in terms of younger defensemen, you could still look to add a couple other guys. They picked up Axel Anderson in one of the Bruins trades, so that's not the worst thing in the world. But obviously, the Troy Terrys, the Max Jones, the Braden Tracys, Sam Steele, Trevor Zegras, like, they're in a pretty good spot. So could you make a change for the sake of making a change and getting a different direction? Sure, but in terms of, you know, I can't necessarily call it a rebuild on the fly because I don't know if they've gone full rebuild. You know, Getzlaf didn't get traded. There's a lot of guys I think you could have pieced away off of that team to be able to call it a full rebuild that they haven't. But end of the day, I think, you know, I think they're on a decent course.
So, you know, Tougie, I don't know how much proof I actually have time to present here because it could end up taking over the entire podcast. I don't think Bob Murray's a good GM at all. I think he's been sitting there spinning the tires with this franchise for 13 years. He wasn't even the GM in 2003 when they basically built this franchise by drafting Getzlaf and Corey Perry, both in the first round. And since then, I mean, this team keeps going nowhere fast. Like, they get a little bit better and then they take two steps back, and that just keeps happening. And then if you look at Bob Murray's trade history, the man's the king of the 1-for-1 and then slightly losing that trade. And it's happened at least 10 times. So I mean, if I'm the Ducks, I think I replace Bob Murray. So I don't know.
Oh, I'm not necessarily defending him as this is certainly the guy. But also, I don't know. For me, am I just like, yeah, absolutely get rid of him? I mean, I just don't know how much of a difference it's going to make. I mean, I don't know. I'm intrigued to see like how confident Ducks fans are in him at this stage. I mean, he certainly, I don't think, has built up the, I guess, the equity that like a Doug Wilson has in San Jose, where fans of that team are just like, no, absolutely keep him, please. Never get rid of him. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see with Anaheim, but it could go either way. I mean, like I said, the foundation is decent. Do you want someone different at the helm? Sure. Is Dallas Eakins the ideal NHL head coach? Probably not. But I don't know. You know, for Anaheim, it's not a matter of, oh, you get a new GM and a new coach in there, and then all of a sudden, bang, they're in contention or something like that. So we'll move on. And DeJ, this is normally the type of question I'd avoid, but I thought of something on the fly, so I ran with it. This is from Dennis. You're a wealthy man, and you decide to create an NHL hockey team without going to places that the NHL has already put teams in. What city, mascot, and colors would you choose? I will give you a second because I already have one. And ladies and gentlemen, coming soon to an ice rink near you, led by our lovely mascot, Waxy, who is a very, very used candle, rocking the lovely gold and red to blind our opponents. I would be the proud owner of the Waxahachie whatchamacallits.
Fantastic.
Why that name came to me, no idea. But we're getting hockey in Waxahachie, I'll tell you what. Look out, Texas. We're coming for you.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this the other day, and we were talking about this a little bit ago, where like what markets aren't exactly served, and I'm going to kind of ignore that to a degree. I mean, obviously Houston's the obvious choice. I think it would be really cool for Baltimore to have an ice hockey team, especially if they mirrored the Ravens purple. Because there isn't really a purple team. We had the Kings for a little bit, but you get like the issue is like when it comes to like what lives around Baltimore, and you're like, well, what animal can we pick? Because there really aren't any. Like Baltimore is just like, well, we've got muskrats.
Muskrats and crime.
We got muskrats, crime, and The Wire.
That's the title of the episode, by the way. Muskrats and crime.
Muskrats and crime. Wicked Tougna, episode 1. So I think the bobcat is like probably the coolest little native animal. So you go Baltimore Bobcats, and then you go with the Ravens purple and black, because you have to. I mean, Maryland has that insane flag. Like anybody that's seen the Terrapins play college football, you're like, what in the world is on that helmet?
Right.
So you go with the purple, you go with the identity, and I don't know. I think that would be cool. I think there needs to be a purple hockey team. There isn't one.
I agree. So there you go. This is from Felix. If Malkin is ever traded from the Pens, it's always been speculated he would end up in Florida. From the Panthers' perspective, how much would you trade away for Malkin at 50% retention? First and foremost, I mean, Russians go to Florida is very much a narrative. Like that's just been a thing for whatever reason. I don't know why, Deej. I don't know if you can explain that, but it's just like, yeah, for some reason that thought has been there. But I feel like this is a question for you. What would you be cool with the Florida Panthers giving up to get Evgeny Malkin on 50% salary?
So, I mean, that's still almost $5 million.
Yes.
For a 34-year-old, gonna be 35 in 1 month of Evgeny Malkin.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, he only has one more year on his contract, though. That's interesting.
Can't wait for the Malkin
Florida,
back to KHL
Florida's
rumors.
just because it's closest to Russia, right? Because like people from Russia, they're all from Western Russia. Like Eastern Russia is just mountains and suffering. So I don't know. Also, you can catch a live tiger show down here, Club Tatiana in Fort Lauderdale. Sounds like a strip club, but it's not. It's a weird tiger restaurant.
The fact that this show could also be called Mountains and Suffering.
I don't know. For 4.75 of Evgeny Malkin, that'll be healthy for 13 games. I don't know. Maybe I would do like a high-end prospect and like a fourth, maybe like a I don't know. So I don't know what I would give for that because the Panthers don't need centers, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like Malkin, if he does get traded, he ends up in Detroit 100%, because why wouldn't you, if you want, like, you know, you're slowly building a team, why not have a guy with multiple cups that can play elite there to like show your kids how to play for a year, much like what the Panthers did with Jaromir Jagr. I feel like that would be awesome for Detroit, you know? So I don't know. I don't know what I would give up for the Panthers. Like, I don't know what we could even send Hextall where he would be like, you know, because I don't know. I feel like I don't know. It's a weird question. I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say I don't want Malkin, but I mean, at this point, like, you know, the Panthers down the middle is Barkov, Sam Bennett, you know, I mean, Alexander Wenberg might not be back, but we've got Anton Lundell, who's probably the best center prospect outside the NHL right now. And then you got Noel Achari. Like, I don't even know where you put Malkin.
Well, I wanted to raise that question just to give you an opportunity to talk about the Florida Panthers, kind of ease you into it, because obviously we have to discuss them today. Before that, though, And before talking about that particular series and the playoffs, our lovely general hockey talk section is really kind of limited to just one thing here. And it's something that we don't really want to discuss in full because it's ridiculous we even have to talk about it. But we'd be remiss if we didn't bring it up. And that is very much that the two of us here, you can say disappointed because you'd like to think we're beyond this shit, even though we obviously know that we're not. But I'd like to think, hopefully, please, that none of our viewers would ever engage in a way like this. But to those that decided to be shit people towards Ethan Bear, again, I'd like to think I'm preaching to the choir here that it's fucking ridiculous that there's no place for it, not just in hockey, but in general. But that's all I can really think to say is if there is somebody who listens to this show or watches what I do on YouTube or on Twitch, and you're just like, yeah, no, I engaged in that and that's fine. It's not. Realize you're wrong. Get your head checked. Be better. What the fuck? DeJ, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but it's just, obviously, it's sickening. Whether it be, what happened to Keandre Miller in that Zoom chat, whatever, over a year ago. You get stuff like this happening. And obviously, like, I can't relate to people who, directly verbally abuse players. Whether it be a Jake Gardner for on-ice screw-ups, whether it be this way with a more racial side to it or racist side to it. I obviously just can't relate to this. Like, I get poking fun at, like, a Tristan Jarry on Twitter or a Carey Price if they have a bad game, but to, like, directly go into, like, Instagram comments, I can't relate to shit like this.
Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting, too, is, like, obviously it's not like one person that we can like name that like directly made these comments, it's just essentially internet trolls, which internet trolls are going to find whatever they think is a weakness or whatever. But something interesting, Ethan Bear and the First Nations tribe he hails from is from Saskatchewan, right? You know what I didn't know? It is incredibly difficult to make the NHL as someone from Saskatchewan, let alone as a member of First Nations. There are only 25 players in the entire NHL from Saskatchewan.
I'm just going to say I love that we're sitting here.
That I put the emphasis on the first syllable? Yes,
I love the way you say it because I guarantee some people are going to be like, it's Saskatchewan, damn it. It's like
you're wrong.
Like the trolling worked.
Yeah, they're wrong. I'm saying it with an American accent where I read it on my maps that I learned in my school. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. This is something that I find interesting, right? Hockey is the least diverse sport because it has the highest barrier to entry, right?
Yeah.
It is very it's not like in the United States, like basketball and gridiron football are super easy to get into because every park has a basketball set up where you can go play. All you need is a ball. People show up. Every American school system is going to give you football pads and an opportunity to play football. Soccer is the world's game because all you need is a ball. But hockey, you need a lot of equipment. You need to have the luxury of being able to find ice time and the time to learn how to ice skate and things like that. And so as we get to the point where through the power of YouTube, through the power of the internet, people from backgrounds that wouldn't necessarily ever have a shot at making the NHL 20 years ago now do, thanks to the internet, thanks to the ability of anybody being able to learn whatever they want and find a way to overcome it. And so things like First Nations players like Ethan Bear making the NHL, succeeding in the NHL is something to be celebrated because it means our sport as a whole is becoming more accessible, which I think every single person that's ever played hockey wants the sport to become more and more accessible, because then the players that can succeed the most have the biggest opportunities to succeed. The players get better. The game gets more competitive. It becomes more fun to watch. So, yeah. I mean, that even if you're not like, all on board, you should celebrate people from diverse backgrounds being a part of the NHL, because it means the NHL is now more competitive, because people that otherwise wouldn't have been able to make the NHL can now make it. Like the sport's better now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have too much else I can add to that, right? I mean, it's unfortunately a conversation that we've had to have before, and I'm sure it's not the last time, unfortunately. That said, Deej, let's rip this Band-Aid off. It's time to talk about the playoffs. It is time to talk about the end of the Florida Panthers season. However, technically, we do have one other thing to discuss, and this could have been a part of the general hockey talk, but obviously this story has kind of blown up a little bit in the past 24 hours or so. The video that came out at the Lightning game of a father and his son being denied entry at the Lightning game due to the jersey that they were wearing. Now, for me, I have no problem ripping the Tampa Bay Lightning apart, or any other team, when they do something stupid. That's pretty well known, I'd like to think, at this point. But the idea of this, the idea of a team, number one, the Tampa Bay Lightning not allowing fans that wear certain jerseys into a certain section of the arena. That has been a rule for a while. I'm pretty sure they're not the only team to do it. I believe the Nashville Predators have the same rule for a certain section of their arena. So I don't really see the need to exclusively rip apart the Tampa Bay Lightning here. But you said you had thoughts on it, so I'll direct it to you. And let the very defensive Lightning fan base throw their vitriol at you.
I mean, I've gone to multiple Tampa Bay games in a Panthers sweater. I've never had a problem. I guess this is for a very specific club section. And the father and son called ahead, and they were actually sitting down. Like, security came over, and they were like, "Sir, we got to ask you to remove your jersey." And that's dumb. I think anybody will tell you it's dumb. A dress code at a sporting event, beyond basic human decency, is stupid. And I think anybody would agree with me. But I would be remiss here, because I think a lot of people are like, well, other franchises do it too. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the irony of a team that refused masks telling people what they can and can't wear.
Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, so before we talk about the series, there's a story I would like to share. Back in 2018, there was a successful businessman by the name of Jeffrey Bezos, and he drove his 1998 Honda Accord to work every day because it had always served him well. He saw no need to buy a more expensive car because, even though he was a billionaire, he was a very practical man, and he wanted to live small. He wanted to live economical. And now here we are 3 years later. That man bought a $500 million yacht because evil always wins. And that's how I feel about this series.
So, yeah, game number 6. Again, we talked about game 5, the emergence of Spencer Knight. Obviously, the conversation about the Bobrovsky contract. I still believe in everything that I said on last show in regards to what the Panthers need to look to do in their future in goal. If you missed last show, hey, go check it out. It's right here. No matter where you're watching or listening, you can find it where you're already listening. So don't worry or watching. Don't worry. But unfortunately, game 6 for the Lightning, it was just taking care of business. Second time Spencer Knight allowed a goal on the first shot. And unfortunately, the Levy could only hold on for so long as the Panthers just could not crack Andre Vasilevsky. I mean, technically, Pat Maroon gets the series-clinching goal. Stamkos scored his third goal of the series in the second. And then Braden Point sealed the deal with a fantastic goal in the third. Killorn added another one. Both Point and Killorn with 4 goals apiece in the first round in 6 games. It's just, at the end of the day, let's talk about this series for both teams, and we'll do the what happens next for Tampa in a little bit after we talk about Nashville, Carolina. So for the Florida Panthers, this series, they played Tampa well in the regular season. We've discussed that. You are dealing with a major injury, not having your best defenseman in Aaron Ekblad. The goaltending carousel, Bobrovsky couldn't get it done. Drieger was hit or miss, which I think was a little bit surprising. You rely on Spencer Knight. He gets a win and falters. At the end of the day, the better team won. Florida certainly didn't embarrass themselves, though. I mean, DeJ, I guess just your general thoughts on the Panthers before we talk about, I guess, what could happen next. But, I mean, you know, they took the defending champs to 6 games in the first round. Tampa, that was a little bit healthier than I expected them to be. There's really no shame in losing the series.
I mean, a team that lost its 2 leading goal scorers, and Mike Hoffman and Evgeny Dadonov, playing without their number one, you could argue a top 5 defenseman in the NHL, and Aaron Ekblad, when he's fully healthy, took the defending champs to 6 games. They finished 1.5 wins this season out of the President's Trophy. They were only 3 points behind the Avs. You know, I guess that's why I'm not like all that crushed about this defeat is suddenly your whole locker room takes the defending champs to 6 games. Oh, that's what you need to do to win the cup. Oh, I'm so pissed. I have this whole off season. Like, there's not like a glaring weakness on this Florida Panthers team other than the Bobrovsky contract. But even then, you know, you're still getting play out of him. Like, obviously, you hope they try and move on from Keith Yandel because he's been completely useless outside of the power play. And then you get Aaron Ekblad back next year. You get Anton Lundell taking a step forward. This team now knows what it takes to win. They understand what it's like to succeed in the regular season. Bill Zito completely changes this franchise in one season, works some crazy, like you see all his moves in the offseason. You're like, all right, whatever, Bill. And then it comes to fruition. And, you know, I mean, we were sitting here 2 weeks ago, GM of the Year award, Bill Zito, professional bike racer, Bill Zito. And so it's like second off season this guy has to work magic. Like he had nothing to work with last year and pulled off a miracle. So I think for the Panthers in a weird way, like if you saw Barkov's interview afterwards, he was like, I'm really proud of this group and now we know what it takes to win. And like, you know, I mean, I can't see a future where this team ever loses another series to Tampa again. It's just the Panthers know what it takes. They're only going to get better from here. This isn't like previous seasons where we had like one chance and then all of our contracts are gone and we're screwed in the offseason. This is like this exact same team can show up and play again next year. There's no crazy, oh, we got to re-sign this guy. And so we've got an awesome window. We've got awesome prospects. So I'm not all that upset about it. And then I guess from the Tampa side of things, you know, you've got basically the same roster that won the cup. The only reason you're over, I know people are all complaining about the cap or whatever. We've addressed that on this show. But the only reason you're over the cap is because you had 2 huge RFAs that needed bonuses. So this is very much the exact same team from last year plus Savard. You know, you're only paying him $1 million. So if I'm a Tampa fan right now, this series was horrifically, I mean, not horrifically, but I mean, this was a very gritty series. This was a brutal series. And the Nashville, Carolina series was not. And so you hope that your team is not absolutely beat up from having the shortened off season of going on that cup run in the pandemic season through the bubble, immediately going into this season. And then your first playoff series is just an absolute bloodbath against the Florida Panthers. And then you're going up against a completely healthy, energized Carolina Hurricanes team with a rookie goalie that looks like he can set the world on fire. It's going to be a hell of a series. If I'm a Tampa fan, you just hope your team's not beat up from this.
Yeah. And I mean, for Florida, there's definitely a lot to that, right? I mean, even you go back to the early 80s, right? The idea of the Oilers falling short at the hands of the Islanders and saying, okay, that's what it takes to win. Like that's been a thing in the sport for a long time. You know, you get a team that has those cup aspirations, you get your first opportunity, you get knocked down. Pittsburgh at the hands of Detroit, in 2008, then 2009, they redeemed themselves. It's been a thing for a long time. So I think you're right. I mean, it's up obviously at that point once that moment happens for the team to then properly follow up. And in terms of a front office, yeah, we're both in agreement. Like the Florida Panthers seemingly, I mean, time will tell. The situation could certainly sour, but they seemingly have the right people at the helm now. Like you said, Bill Zito, in a very short amount of time, had a very big impact on this team, especially like the Patrick Hornqvist acquisition. And then, having Joel Quenneville at the helm of this team as well as the head coach and what that means. They are in a very good spot. We'll see what happens moving forward. This offseason, like we talked about, could they be in a situation where perhaps they give up some things to try and get out from underneath some rough contracts, whether it be Keith Yandel or Sergei Bobrovsky? I mean, I could certainly see some dealings with them when it comes to the Seattle Kraken. But in terms of this organization, yes, they haven't won a playoff matchup since 96, but are they in arguably the best spot they've been in since 96? Yeah. I don't remember a time where the Panthers have looked, I'm going to say, this stable as an organization. I mean, obviously, a big thing about this playoff run, the having fans in attendance was huge, and that place looked packed for sure. And obviously the idea of an all-Florida series and what that can do for that rivalry and to spark fan interest as well. I think the Florida Panthers are in as good of a spot as they have ever been in their history. Granted, of course, they didn't make it to a cup final in this go-around, but for long-term stability, I think they're in a very, very good spot. And ultimately, again, you ran into Tampa. And I don't think there's any shame in losing whatsoever to, and again, I still can't believe some people think I don't think this about the Lightning, but one of the best constructed teams, I think, in the history of the NHL. Based off of the moves that were made last year, the moves that were made this year, not breaking any rules, but certainly trying their best to skirt their way around. Take the idea of give an inch, take a mile. That's what Tampa has done. The NHL with their salary cap is like, okay, we're going to leave you some maneuverability here. And Tampa's like, hey, thank you. And somehow in the past 2 years, we're going to add Barclay Goodrow. We're going to add David Savard. And just how they're making that work is incredible. So we'll talk a little bit more about Tampa later on for sure. But for the Florida Panthers, I mean, yeah, the goaltending situation's interesting. The defense situation's interesting as well, especially, when talking about some of the moves that they could make, whether it be in free agency or some of the people that they have already. And then overall, obviously that little bit of extra forward help could go a long way. I get that there's going to be some nervous energy. Like you look at what's coming up this offseason for the Panthers, and they do have some decisions to make for sure. Sam Bennett's an RFA. He's going to have to be re-signed. They're definitely going to bring him back. Alex Wenberg coming off the books. I could see them bringing him back, but if he's making over $225 like he did this year, that's a bit rough to justify in my opinion because Anthony Duclair's an RFA, Lucas Wallmark an RFA, whatever. Nikita Gusev's a UFA. I don't know if they'll bring him back. But obviously, the elephant in the room is after this upcoming season, Sasha Barkov is a UFA. And that's obviously going to provide quite a bit of nervous energy. Defensively, Brandon Montour is up. Deej, what do you think about Brandon Montour? How would you feel about him coming back?
So I liked Montour, right? The issue with Montour is he was very much a Ekblad replacement, where he filled the exact same role in the lineup that Aaron Ekblad does, but everything was just a little bit worse, if that makes sense. Like, he's a very good player. He's definitely I could easily see him making around $4 million on any team this offseason, but I don't see him coming back because the spot's just not going to be open for him with Ekblad back.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, aside from that too, right? Like, that's the thing for the Panthers. They have money coming off the books. They can maneuver and tinker around here a little bit. Obviously, again, the idea of trying to win next year is certainly going to be there because Huberdeau and Barkov are both at 5.9 mil. We'll see what happens. I mean, this could be a very big offseason for the Florida Panthers. We'll see how it plays out. Yeah, I mean, the idea of, like, in terms of contracts to get rid of, I mean, Bobrovsky stands out. I'm intrigued to see if they find a way to get rid of Yandel or Strawman, because neither were major contributors.
So here's the thing too, right? If you look at their cap situation, so Strawman is making 5.5, which is an absolute crime. And the thing is Strawman's contract is up at the exact same time Barkov's is, and Barkov's already making 5.9, almost 6. And you got to figure, like, a player of Barkov's caliber, like, you know, like, I don't know if he gets 10, but if he gets he'll probably get somewhere between 8 and 9, right? That's, you know, if you look at it as, okay, we're already paying for 2/3 of that contract, and then the Strawman contract's up at the same time, like, I don't see them having to struggle to sign Barkov because that Strawman contract is so bad. And then at the same time, let's say miraculously they can't get rid of Keith Yandel, who is making 6.3. I hope you're not doing well, Tom Rowe. He's up at the same time as Jonathan Huberdeau. I mean, at that point, Jonathan Huberdeau would be 30.
Yeah.
And so if the Panthers have not made a deep cup run in the next 2 years, I could see Huberdeau walking for Montreal. He's probably the best French Canadian player in the league. I mean, either him or Patrice Bergeron at this point are the two guys. But, you know, I mean, it's like we said, this team is set up as is, with the additions of Anton Lundell and Aaron Ekblad, and the emergence of Spencer Knight, who is only 20 years old in a position that usually does not peak until age 26, 27. I mean, this team's set up as a cup contender. Power rankings, this is a top 5 team going into next year. And so, I mean, I don't see us not making that deep run that immediately draws Huberdeau and Barkov back. So I don't know. I mean, like, even with the cap issues, there's a obvious solution to both of them. That said, would love to see Zito work some magic. I mean, and then go ahead.
I think he has to move on from Yandel or Bobrovsky. Has to.
Yeah, Yandel, Bobrovsky, or Strawman, even if he just moves on from one, it's a game changer. I mean, Strawman and Yandel were scratched. Yandel was scratched for 3 of those playoff games. Strawman barely played the final 20 games of the season. And Bob has just been a slightly below average goaltender. I mean, you're still, the value that you're getting in terms of those 3 bad contracts, I would say that Strawman and Yandel contracts, in terms of like the absolute value of the player, are worse than the Bob contract, because for the Bob contract, you're still getting a starting goalie that you're probably overpaying for about $3 to $4 million, as opposed to having an empty roster spot that you're overpaying 5.5 or 6.3 for. You know, if you get my logic there, like the Bob contract's a monstrosity. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to defend it, but in terms of the actual value, you can at least financial return, you can at least get 30, 40, 50 starts out of the guy, as opposed to Yandel, who you will get negative 100 goals, or Strawman, who's going to sit on the bench and talk about finishing his medical degree, because that's what he's done in all of his interviews.
So, yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm looking at it here too. Like, obviously, you probably wouldn't buy out the last year of Strawman's deal. But is it like Strawman, like you said, it's an expiring deal. That is the type of guy that you can go to to the LA Kings and say, we'll give you a 2nd round pick to take Anton Strawman. Like, that is the type of contract that you throw in a piece for a team like LA or Detroit to take on this guy. I mean, the Rangers just did it with Detroit for the sake of Mark Stahl. You mean to tell me they wouldn't do the same thing in order to take Anton Strawman? I'm sure they would. It makes all the sense in the world. So there is no way. I will say it would be an absolute failure on Bill Zito's part if at least one of Bobrovsky and Strawman wasn't moved. And I'm sure at least one will be moved.
Yeah, if all three are back, it's
I will revoke my GM of the Year claim if he does not move at least one of those players. I'm certain he will. So all in all, again, for Tampa, for Florida, really good season. Tampa, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a second because their season's not done. That brings us to NASCAR, which is perfect given the theme of the show, apparently.
Yeah, Chase Elliott, he got his first win of the season. I mean,
Circuit of the Americas
is a very dangerous track. They probably shouldn't have ran it in the rain, but, it was good to see Chase get one. It was about time.
The kid finally made it happen.
The son of Awesome Bill.
Oh, God.
Yeah, NASCAR. So before we get into the series, I just want to make a joke about last night and Creed.
Well, hold on, because before that, we have to talk about Game 5, because that happened the night of the last show, and it does set the stage for what happened. And trust me, we're talking about Creed. But Game number 5... which, again, might be forgotten, I will say, was the game that had maybe the worst goalie interference call I've seen in recent memory, where Warren Fogle was called essentially for tapping Saros, even though it was Roman Josi that hit him. One of the worst calls I've ever seen. Again, nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing should surprise you when it comes to officiating. That's just how the league works at this point. We've been over this, but it was legitimately one of the worst calls I have ever seen. It was that bad. But in the end, that fifth game, I mean, again, this was a really close series for the most part because UC Saros was just unreal. Carolina outshot them 37-25. Another super physical series as well, over 100 hits combined in Game 5. But Carolina had the tendency of sticking around as much as Nashville did. And allow me to explain. Game 5, Nashville scores first with Trennan. Nate just ties it. Trennan scores again in the second. Nate just ties it in the third. An incredible back and forth between two pretty damn good young players. And then Jordan Stahl won it in overtime. And that gets us to Game 6, which happened last night, where, again, kind of that theme of both teams really playing that pesky role of hanging around. And it was looking good for Nashville. It really was. First period, Cousins scores. Brock McGinn tied it. Second period, though, Granlund and Johansson. Ryan Johansson, by the way, 3 goals in the first round matchup against Carolina. It's a positive that they saw some sort of life from Duchesne, Johansson, and those, frankly, overpaid players that haven't lived up to those contracts. But then obviously late in the second, Aho scores. Dougie Hamilton ties it with 6 minutes to go. Sebastian Aho wins it in OT. A minute into it, Carolina wins the series. But before talking about what it means for both teams, the individual games, Game 6's main highlight was the out-of-nowhere Creed/Tonic, who apparently also played, concert.
Yeah. Well, so the first thing I wanted to address is like that goalie interference penalty, because it was weird, right? Because I think the NHL did a very poor job of communicating that it wasn't really like the physical contact with Saros that they were calling. It was like when Fogle goes edge to edge with Saros in the crease before the contact. I don't know. It's like a marginal call, but I can definitely understand why they called it. Like it looked like regular season goaltender interference, but don't get me started on like why they should just call the playoffs like the regular season. I'll be here all day. But yeah, I don't think the actual contact, at least from my understanding of it, was not the goaltender interference. It was more Fogle kicking his skate into Saros before anything even happened. But I don't know. They just do such a poor job of communicating at the end of the day, I think is the issue with goaltender interference, because like, I mean, for all I know, they could be looking at the exact same hit that you were looking at when Josi basically just decks his own goaltender, or when Josi decks his own goaltender and called that on Carolina because they just don't explain anything to the fans, which is dumb. So we'll get to Creed. This, to me, is the new Imagine Dragons curse. I don't know if you remember Vegas. They had Imagine Dragons or some Abercrombie models. It's difficult to tell on the ice.
Whatever it takes, Deej.
Whatever it takes, and the Capitals won. So the exact same thing happened.
Whatever it takes. There we go.
So anyways, from what I understand, Scott Stapp, he called up the owner of Nashville. And he was like, hey, I've got a song. It's called Come On Predators, Let's Soar. And that's how he ended up.
Let's play Pockets game day. He just replaces Marlins Will Soar with hockey-related terminology. Yes.
Yeah, we got
God.
slap shots, big hits, power plays.
Anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, Scott Stapp, the lead singer of Creed, released a song for the Miami Marlins called Marlins Will Soar. That is also your homework to go listen to that song.
I can't stress enough that the song was unsolicited, that he just showed up to the Marlins one day and was like, hey guys, I recorded a song for you. And they were like, no, thanks. they turned him down.
Oh God.
So
I love that, man.
It's really great. Creed's a weird, you would think there would be a country band. Maybe they're trying to like avoid stereotypes.
Too late.
Too late. Series over. Carolina wins. Creed is such a weird choice in 2021.
I know.
I think that's why it's so funny. Is it's just like
I wish I was there for that. God.
You know, somebody in the organization that's like a shot caller or whatever, like some C-level executive. He's like, Creed's my favorite band. It's got to be Creed. You know, that's why it's hilarious.
The Vince McMahon of the NHL, where they're just so out of touch. It's like in 2001, like, what are the young kids like? Do they still like Cyndi Lauper? It's like, right? Yes. What are the young kids like in 2021? Let's bring in Creed. It's delightful. It's absolutely delightful, and it made my day last night. It genuinely made my day to see Creed at Bridgestone. I seriously wish I could have been there live. But as you mentioned, might have brought on a little bit of bad luck for Nashville.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
yeah, right. They're not even
Florida, so it's not even like it's a local tie. Like it just gets funnier the more you research into it.
God.
Yeah, it definitely cursed their game. That's why they lost. That overtime game-winning goal was like a nothing shot. It took everybody off guard.
Yeah.
And I blame Creed for that.
So for the Nashville Predators, they fall in 6. Obviously, we're going to talk about Carolina and Tampa here in a minute. But for Nashville, you fall in 6. And like I mentioned, they were essentially playing with house money, right? Like they barely made it in over Dallas. And you were expected, much like someone like the Winnipeg Jets, people spotted you maybe a game. You push it to 6, close series, all things considered, numerous overtimes. It was a very impressive performance for this roster. And I think now for Nashville as well, I mean, they're coming up on a pretty interesting period here because you look at their next 3 drafts, they aren't missing any of their picks in the first 5 rounds over the next 3 years. Like, you know, they did a pretty good job of not overextending to keep the window open and giving up too many draft picks. Do they have some rough contracts? I mean, yeah, you're paying Duchesne and Johansson $8 million each for the next 6 and 5 years, respectively. That is rough, even though, again, both had pretty decent postseasons. It's pretty rough at the end of the day. I mean, you can pick apart this roster. They're not really losing anybody critical at this stage. Like Granlund's up, Hall is up, Brad Richardson. They have a bunch of young RFA forwards. Defensively, Goodbranson is the only UFA who is still somehow making $4 million. So credit to Erica Branson's agent. Obviously, the big thing here is, have we seen the last of Pekka Rinne? Presumably so. He's 38 years old. He wasn't the starter. He's up at the end of this year. The big thing for them is RFA UC Saros, who's, was making 1.5. He's at least going to be making what Pekka Rinne was making. Honestly, I think 6.5 could be reasonable. The money that Pekka was making, added to UC Saros' contract, there you go. You have your goalie. So Nashville, they're in an interesting spot. I don't know if I'd say I expect them to be a playoff team next year. In a full season, the division's going back to normal. I don't know about that. You also had the fact that Kyle Turris' buyout is $2 million forever and ever. Amen. We'll see what happens with them, but the series went almost as well as you could have hoped for. They didn't get blown out. A lot of people thought they would. It's a pretty big win, all things considered. You had one of the more entertaining series. You didn't get embarrassed. I consider it a win.
Yeah, I do too. And then once all said and done, you got, I don't know, 10 million coming off the books next year that you can kind of reappropriate to maybe get some forward help, maybe pick up Mike Hoffman. That's been a rumor every single year, is Mike Hoffman to the Nashville Predators.
Well, the funny thing is, though, now that you say that, right, it's like they have their goalie in Saros. They have
got an elite defense.
They still have Yossi, Ellis, and Ekholm. Ekholm's up after next year. But you still have arguably the best, like in terms of a team's top 3 defensemen, they still might have the best in the league. You know, if you look at like Toronto with like Riley, Brody, Muzzin, or Minnesota with Spurgeon, Brodin, and then I guess you'd put Dumba or Suter in that third spot, they might have the best top 3 defensemen still in the league for next year. If they can get that forward help, yeah. The big issue, though, obviously, is up front you don't have that star power, right? And that's been the big conversation. You need the mix of both. Edmonton, you have the star power, you don't have the depth. Other teams like Montreal, you have the depth, you don't have the star power. Nashville's in sort of a Montreal situation where, yeah, like again, Johansson, Duchesne were pretty good. You have Forsberg, you have Arvidsson, Mikhail Granlund was solid. Like you have the depth. Luke Cunnin even had a really good series, at least on the score sheet. You just don't have that star power. Are you going to be able to bring in the star power with that amount of money? Probably not. But they're in an interesting enough spot where, yeah, now that I think about it, depending on what they do this offseason, maybe they could find themselves back in a playoff spot.
Yeah, and then, obviously this is the prospects fanboy in me, but if your goaltenders next year are Saros, Askarov, doesn't sound too bad, does it?
Yeah, and even that's the thing though, right? Like UC Saros, I'm not saying they're going to find themselves in a Florida situation or an LA situation where it's, well, we have this goalie, but here's the young guy. I'm not saying they're going to find themselves in that situation. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but Saros at 26 allows them to not have to rush Askarov at all, which is
Askarov has a late birthday. He's still only 18.
Yeah, so we're talking about Spencer Knight at 20 making the NHL being ridiculous, right? So again, Nashville is set up pretty well, all things considered. There are certainly worse ways to be left in the aftermath of trying to make a cup run than where they are right now. Obviously having to buy out Kyle Turris kind of sucks. That the cap hit's going to affect you for a long time. But yeah, end of the day, I don't mind where they are. So that said, we kind of got the postmortems out of the way for Nashville and Florida. Tampa Bay and Carolina confirmed for round number 2. I don't even know where to begin with this particular preview because, it's another heavyweight matchup here. And both teams are coming off of that physical series, actually. You could argue that there was a bit more vitriol between, Tampa and Florida, which would make sense. But at the end of the day, I can't wait for this. And I think that's kind of what we were guaranteed, right? Even it was similar as well to like, oh, well, Colorado, if they make it, which they did, if they play Vegas or Minnesota, regardless, it's interesting. It was the same thing here. Nobody really gave Nashville a shot. I'd say rightfully so. They had a puncher's chance. That was about it. But the idea of if it's Florida, Carolina, Tampa, or Carolina, regardless, it's going to be fantastic. And indeed, we're seeing that setup here. Now, on the Tougie Steak Bracket Challenge, I did have Florida beating Tampa because, like I said, I thought Tampa would be a little bit more roughed up than what they were letting on. It wasn't to discount the Lightning. I just thought, oh, man, we're hearing Victor Hedman's roughed up. How healthy are Kucherov and Stamkos? Obviously, they're looking good at this point. I had Carolina moving on beyond the Panthers, though, because of that physical series. DeJ, I guess just your initial thoughts here, because, I mean, two great goaltenders, two great defenses, offensive firepower. I mean, goddamn.
So before we do the series, I do have some breaking news, Tampa Bay related. They have just announced that they are getting rid of their no other team jersey policy.
Really?
Now that their club section has been canceled. Yeah, this is from Wyshynski. About 20 minutes ago. They
okay, so you know what then? No, I said I wasn't going to give
by Carolina.
I said I wasn't going to give them any vitriol. You cowards. You've had this rule for years. Now. You finally get called out on the internet and you immediately back down? Fuck.
Oh my God.
Damn it. That organization. You know what? I'm sorry to any Lightning fan. Embrace the villain role because you are. You have a good team. You have a fucking group of idiots that wouldn't wear a mask in a pandemic because you're selfish fucks. And now you have an ownership group that's like, oh no, bad press. Let's back down on a rule we've had for a year. Get fucked, Tampa. Get fucked. Nobody likes you. I'm sure you enjoy that. Get fucked. Cowards to immediately back down on that. My God. You should be embarrassed. Please tell me you weren't lying, because otherwise
I feel like they would have kept the. No, yeah, that's real. It's you can check out Wyshynski on Twitter. I feel like if the kid wasn't like 11 years old and like not being an incredibly nice guy on the video, like I feel like they would have just been like, fine, whatever, we're keeping it.
It's because they get called out for being a douche to a kid.
Dreams. That said. Let me switch gears before you turn off the podcast here, Tampa fans. There is something Tampa has that Carolina does not, and that is superstars.
Fair.
Kucherov, Stamkos. I mean, Hedman is obviously playing a little hurt. Anybody who watched the Florida series can see that. I would argue that Dougie Hamilton and a slightly hurt Victor Hedman cancel each other out. That said, there is no Kucherov for the Carolina Hurricanes. And you've just got to hope that your rookie goaltender can somehow shut down the guy that I believe to be the best wing in the entire NHL. And I say that because Draisaitl is a center. I don't care if they field two centers. Draisaitl is a center. Kucherov is the best wing in the NHL. And he's not the best wing in the NHL the way Ovechkin is. He is like Pasternak, but with an insane vision, an insane wrist shot. Something that's incredibly underrated about Nikita Kucherov is if you look at his defensive metrics, they are Mark Stone-esque. He can take away, he can protect. There is a reason Kucherov is on the penalty kill, and it is not to score shorthanded goals. To me, these teams look absolutely even neck for neck on paper until you get to that top line. And I mean, I would argue that Braden Point and this version of Vincent Trocheck we've seen in Carolina are very similar players in terms of their speed, playmaking ability, their clutch factor, their ability to finish. Most years, Braden Point's obviously a significantly better player. He's younger. I mean, Kucherov, we've only seen Trocheck, we've only seen a very small sample size of him performing to this degree. But when you get to Kucherov, there's no answer. You're like, you're not going to be able to tell me that Nino Niederreiter is your star wing that can Kucherov this series for you. I mean, I don't know how you compete with that. And I think that's, as long as he was not severely beat up in that first round, which, I mean, he's already playing a little hurt, came off of hip replacement surgery. I mean, that's the difference for me.
I mean, we just talked about it with Nashville, right? And what they could look to do this offseason, but how they lack the star power. Carolina doesn't necessarily lack the star power, in my opinion, but does it measure up to Tampa's? Not quite. I mean, you know, you look at that top six. Svechnikov, Aho, Teravainen. I mean, Teuvo was a bit slow in the series, but, I mean, Aho had 7 points in 6 games. Niederreiter will need to wake up as well. I mean, Niederreiter and Teravainen have a combined 3 points. Vinny Trocheck has 3 on his own. Martin Necas with 5 points. Jordan Stahl with 5 points as well. And the fourth line did pretty well too, but I think you got a fair point there, right? Where what does Carolina do well in terms of offense that Tampa doesn't necessarily do better on paper? And I think that might be the answer to this series. I'm not ruling out Carolina at this stage. You know, initially my thought was, you know, Carolina might have it easier against Nashville, so whoever comes out of the Battle of Florida is a little bit more worn down. Kind of the same thing that I thought for Bruins Caps. The winner of that moves on, but obviously the Bruins made it through. And you could argue that, shockingly, Pittsburgh and the New York Islanders is more physical than Boston and Washington. So a lot of the narratives and storylines heading into, you know, series and what you thought you might see in the second round were really flipped on their heads. As it is, both of these teams are essentially as healthy as they can be. I think the only defined injury right now is Cedric Paquette, shockingly, of course, for Carolina now, not for Tampa. It's a tough one to call. I mean, bottom line is, though, Tampa's the favorite until they're not, right? Carolina has more than a puncher's chance in this. Like, you know, you talk about it. Obviously, Vasilevsky gets the edge over Nedeljkovic, even though Nedeljkovic has been great. Vasi's done it for longer. Defensively, I mean, yeah, Slavin, Hamilton, Pesce is great, but Tampa being able to counter that with who they have. I mean, Tampa has to be the favorite until they're not. That's pretty much all you can say. I can see Carolina winning this, but it's still a bit of an uphill battle. I mean, it would be surprising, right? But this is the time where Carolina has to prove themselves, right? Because they've had, you know, we beat Washington but lost to Boston. We made it here and then fell short again. Like, this is a very decisive moment for the Carolina Hurricanes. For Tampa, like you said, if they fall short, man, you won the cup last year, the whole pandemic and everything. Like, you could excuse the Lightning for essentially running out of gas. The idea for Carolina, though, it's like, yes, this is that big hurdle that you have to overcome. This is your Washington going up against Pittsburgh. If you're going to make it, you have to go through them type of moment. Is Carolina actually ready for that? Are they constructed well enough to get past them? Yes, but will they? I don't know. I mean, I'm siding with Tampa in this one. If this series goes any shorter than 6 or 7, it's very surprising. It's going to be an incredible series to watch. It's there's just so many different ways it could go. But I mean, it's obviously I think impossible to not be excited for the series.
Well, let me run a few numbers by you real quick of why I'm excited for this series. So these teams met 8 times in the regular season. They both won 4 games. In those 4 games, the Canes scored 18 goals. The Bolts scored 17. This, based on their regular season matchups, is absolutely neck and neck. And where this changes is Stamkos and Kucherov. Stamkos was there for some of those, but Kucherov notoriously absent for all 8 of those games. So I don't know. I think that's why I give the edge to Tampa here. That said, our projected Jack Adams Award winner, Rod Brindamore, I think he might be as big of an X factor in this series for the Carolina Hurricanes as Nikita Kucherov is for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, like, like I said, you look at Nashville, you look at Winnipeg in the first round. You gave those teams puncher's chance. Turns out Nashville, put in some good shots, couldn't get the job done. Winnipeg connected clean. It was a Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo left hand kind of clean, knocking out Edmonton. This is a heavyweight tilt. I'm excited for it. Not too much else I think we could say right now, but obviously excited to see when this series starts. We move on to another series that is over. We got 3 other series to talk about here. I mean, technically 4 if we count in a preview. The New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins, game number 6, back on Wednesday in front of a ridiculous crowd at Nassau who could have been witnessing the final game at that rink. Instead, they very much do not, as the Islanders win this one 5-3. Deej, first and foremost, this Islanders crowd, obviously, like, Nashville fans have this reputation. When did the Islanders fans, obviously, there was the yes chant that's been around for a while now. There's been the chanting, but they continue to take on the form of, a soccer crowd, a football crowd in, Scotland, just constantly with chanting and just everything throughout the game. It's just nothing but noise. When did, again, I can see that, the breadcrumbs of the evolution that have been there, but when did it get to this stage that the New York Islanders, of all people, where they have one of the best atmospheres in hockey? When exactly did this happen? Is it just because they're oh, thank God we're back in Nassau and we don't have to look at the car in the corner from our obscured views in Brooklyn anymore? Was that the catalyst for it? What the hell happened?
I mean, I don't think there's a single person here that would disagree with me that people from New York are the loudest people on earth. And it doesn't matter if that borough is Long Island or Manhattan, or even Brooklyn for that matter. Although, I mean, Brooklyn, bit of a hipster neighborhood. I get it. They're a little bit quieter when they're playing at Barclays. So this Nassau series, I definitely get it. I mean, just New Yorkers. They're loud. They honk. They swear. And they all unite in a singular voice when they hate somebody. And that is a crowd you don't want to mess with. They're like if Philadelphia Flyers fans were all on the same page. That's exactly how I describe it. There's a force to be reckoned with there, and they're all just united in their hate for John Tavares. And that, I think, is what has fueled them for these past 3 years. Just getting spurned like that. They've just all showed up, and in 3 years, they've made it past the first round twice.
Honestly, that's a fair point, bringing up the John Tavares thing, because that really did seem to kind of galvanize that fan base in terms of an us against everyone else mentality.
Yeah, he didn't just leave the Islanders. He left he got a massive amount of people from New York to hate him at once. Can you name anybody else that's done that? That's
John
not a
Rocker.
Terrorist or Rudy Giuliani. I was
even better. I got one ups. Well done, sir. Well done. Oh, God, that's why he gets paid the big bucks, folks. But so, all things considered, for the Islanders, again, that sixth game, that deciding game, it was just kind of the same thing. It was close until it wasn't. Jeff Carter scored a minute and a half into that. And again, Jeff Carter was an amazing pickup for Pittsburgh. But then again, it happens. Beauvillier ties it within 4 minutes. Jake Gensel scores. Just over a minute later, Kyle Palmieri scores. That is what the Islanders, it felt like that's what they did to Pittsburgh for the entire series. Is any time Pittsburgh took the lead, they fought back so fast, and the Penguins just couldn't handle it. And the second period shows that. Jason Zucker scores under 2 minutes into the period. Penguins up 3-2. And then you had another instance. The fact this wasn't even the first time this happened in the series. Brock Nelson scores at 8:35. Pollock scores at 8:48. And then Nelson at 11:34. And then done. No other scoring for the rest of the game. That is just It's crazy how they did that multiple times, to the Penguins in this series, clearly frustrated them. Like, they won the mental battle against the battle-tested Penguins. Now, you could say it's not quite the same Penguins roster that's necessarily battle-tested to that extent, but clearly the fact that you can still get under the skin of guys like Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin, which they did, I mean, it's an accomplishment. And flat out, I mean, yeah, the Islanders won the mental chess match, and that led to them winning the series.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was necessary. Well, I guess like a chess match in a way, but I cannot undersell enough how many games that Pittsburgh had a lead in this series and then lost the game. I think almost every single game the Islanders won, there was a comeback. I don't think there were any games where the Islanders were on top for the majority of the game. I don't like the Penguins did really well for 20, 40 minutes a game. And then, I mean, obviously we talked, I feel like we really ripped into Tristan Jarry last week. And it was like what I said, they're going to find out what Tristan Jarry they have on Friday.
Yeah.
And they found out.
Yeah. So for the Islanders, again, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but for the Penguins then and what this means. I mean, first and foremost, the idea of bringing in Ron Hextall, not a horrible idea. He made some moves that, certainly bettered this team. They won this division. I mean, people were ruling the Penguins out of it heading into this season. So for them to do what they did, fantastic, especially because they really lived up to that reputation that they've had of, we're just going to take this random player nobody's heard of, and he's going to be great. And they got away with that again somehow. Like, they keep making that work. A shout out to Radim Zahorna, of all people, who put up points for the Penguins this year, and Drew O'Connor. But what happens now is obviously the question on everyone's mind. Deej, you're looking at a team that heading into this draft has their second and their fifth in the first 5 rounds.
Yeah.
They do have 3 sevenths.
First for Jason Zucker.
Yeah. They do have 3 sevenths, and next year they don't have their third. I mean, the question is there of when is the right time for the Penguins to pull the chute and say enough. The argument there, and it's an argument that we've made on the show, though, is as long as you have Sidney Crosby, you have to just bleed the stone dry, essentially? Like, I'm trying to think of a way to go. Like, you just have to keep chipping away until there's nothing left to chip away at. Like, it's very similar to what's going on in Edmonton. Like, Edmonton's in that rough spot because you can't afford to take another 3 to 5 years to retool, rebuild. Like, you gotta go now. You have to make this work. And for Pittsburgh, the question is, Sidney Crosby now at 33. Like, if Sidney Crosby's 36, 37, and this happens, cut it off. It's clearly done. Now is the time to say, okay, we can have old man Crosby be the guy. But right now, it's like you still have that feeling of having to go for it. And, in terms of deals coming off the books, like, there's really not much. Like, Sevier is off the books. You have, like, Aston Reese as an RFA. Cody Cece's a UFA, which, I mean, he might get a goddamn raise after the season he had. He only made $125 this year. He had a pretty good year. He might get a raise. Maybe he takes a pay cut to stay in Pittsburgh. That might not be the worst idea for him, all things considered. But, this roster likely won't change much. Like, they don't have a ton of cap space. They don't have a ton of cap coming off the books. So if they want to make changes, it has to be through trading. But what are the answers here? I mean, yeah, is the idea of moving on from Malkin the best idea? I mean, just Zucker or Tanev, maybe, like, defensively. Do you try to move on from, like, Matheson already? Like, There just aren't that many great answers. And Tristan Jarry, this was his first year of a $3.5 million contract. He has 2 years left after this. I just don't really see, especially with an over $1.1 million buyout of Jack Johnson. Like, they do have $2 million coming off the books for the Nick Bjugstad retention. But really, they have very little cap to work with. And I still think, like, again, as long as
the John Marino extension.
Oh my God, you're right. That Marino extension kicks in.
Kicks in next year.
Whew, yeah, John Marino from $9.25 to $4.4
out of nowhere.
So yeah, there goes most of your money right there for John Marino getting paid. They have to move a defenseman then. They have to. You have Letang at $7.25 for the rest of for next year, and then he's a UFA. Matheson at $4.875. Dumoulin at $4.1. Pettersson at over $4 million, and then Marino at $4.4. They have to move a defenseman. You cannot be paying 5 guys on defense at least $4 million. You can't be doing it. So somebody's got to go there. It's an interesting offseason for them too. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's. It's been tough to say, like, the NHL in terms of intrigue with every team and the storylines that they have. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a better time because, yeah, for Pittsburgh here, what do you do? Like, can you afford to take 2 to 3 years off to try and restock the cupboards and push Crosby to age 35, 36, maybe even 37 before you push again? Like, is that the best idea? Is that what you have to do? And again, they have to get rid of, in theory, they have to get rid of somebody. Like, you can't afford to be paying a third pairing guy $4 million on defense. Like, you can't do it. So somebody's got to go. And then Tristan Jarry as well. Like, I'm just saying, again, I will continue to bang this drum. Get that guy a new goalie coach, and wonderful things might happen. Look at what the Islanders have done with their elite goaltending coaching, getting Leonard and Varlamov, and now Sorokin on track. I mean, you got to try something different there, because that is probably, are you going to be able to trade Tristan Jarry? No. So try something different, get a different goalie coach in there, and maybe you can make this work, because you have to make it work. I don't even see necessarily how they could even strip down this team right now to even do a retool or a rebuild. Like, they're stuck in having to go for it.
Yeah, you just hope Seattle takes a defenseman.
I mean, that's another factor too, right? Who might Seattle take? What? I mean, I don't think they're not going to want to use a buyout. What buyout might happen? That is another factor as well, is the Seattle expansion. So maybe they'll get that cap relief there. But even then, you can't bank on it. Like, who's to say? Like, oh yeah, no, Seattle will definitely take one of the $3-4 million defensemen that Pittsburgh leaves open. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're telling me, like, oh yeah, Seattle will definitely take Marcus Pettersson or Mike Matheson, are you sure? Because they could easily say, like, hey, look, we're going to take Teddy Bluger, unless you say, hey, we'll throw in a second-round pick for you to take Michael Matheson. Like, there's no way Seattle won't try to do what Vegas did. I don't think there's any guarantees that Pittsburgh, who already lack draft picks, or potentially prospects as well, who they've given up on a lot of guys. If you're telling me that Seattle says, yeah, we'll take Kasper Bjorkqvist and a third, and then we'll guarantee you that we take Mike Matheson, it's just such a bad spot for the Penguins right now. They can make it work, but, man, that path is very unclear.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what you do.
So we'll move on then, not to another playoff series, but to another impending playoff series, Deej. That begins, I can't believe this, tomorrow night. Saturday night, the second round begins as the New York Islanders move on to take on the Boston Bruins. This was probably my least expected second round matchup. Out of all the possible combinations, Islanders and Bruins, I did not expect this at all. For the New York Islanders, I mean, talking about that team, that lineup, I mean, the big thing, obviously, in terms of goaltending, you probably give the Bruins the edge I think that's fair. Look, I know Sorokin's playing hot right now. Tuukka Rask had, I believe, unless it changed, the second highest save percentage in round number 1. Like, Tuukka Rask is still legit. Anyone that denies that is an idiot. But Sorokin's on a heater right now. Varlamov struggled in his 2 games. That's a hell of a backup to have. Whereas if the Bruins had to fall back, they fall back to Jeremy Swayman, who was amazing in his limited action in the regular season, but it would be his first playoff game. They could also go to Halak, but Swayman's the designated backup. And then you get into comparing the forwards and the defense. I mean, there's no doubt you want to talk about the depth. Like, both teams have pretty good depth. The Bruins obviously have the star power advantage. Well, they could have had Matt Barzal. Yeah, I know, whatever. Defensively, I mean, there's an argument for either side. I'd be cool with calling it a toss-up. I still think the Bruins have the best defenseman of either team in Charlie McAvoy. But then there's the great X factor for the Islanders, right, Deej? As always, it's Barry Trotz. Because of course it is. It's Barry fricking Trotz that might just be able to coach his way to making this happen. It's going to be a physical series. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, the Bruins, like, they got this clear path. But, I mean, Deej, the Islanders made the Final Four last year. I'm scared. I am just as scared of the New York Islanders as I was of the Washington Capitals.
Yeah. I know you say that, but I think in terms of mental toughness, in terms of being reignited by the Taylor Hall acquisition, I think the Boston Bruins are a significantly bigger challenge for this scrappy, come from behind, no true star power Islanders team than the Penguins were.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just not wanting to appear overconfident or cocky about the situation, but genuinely, I can't sit here and say definitively, just like I really struggled to say the Bruins would make it past the Caps. And it was with the caveat that I think whoever made it out of that very physical series would fall in the next round. And then again, we talked about it. It didn't end up being all that physical of a drawn-out series with the Caps. My heart obviously says the Bruins. My head says the Bruins. But I refuse, under any circumstances, to doubt the best hockey coach on the planet in Barry Trotz. I cannot doubt what that man is able to do in terms of taking a team like the Islanders that on paper, and I think even Islanders fans can agree with this, on paper, this is probably a fringe playoff team. But the systems he employs, the confidence he instills, there's just something magical about this team. And actually, I will say, Ilya Sorokin, Rask ended up with a 941. Sorokin ended up with a 943. So, I mean, even in terms of that, like, Ilya Sorokin, technically better than Tuukka Rask in one fewer game. But, like, the goaltending's on point. It's just, I can't doubt them. And it's like I said, it's like you look at this team, like Pollock, Leddy, Mayfield, Green, and Dobson. Like, that doesn't scream best defense in the world, but neither does the Bruins defense. And the Islanders got a little bit more offense, I feel like, out of their defense. Like, I have no idea. Obviously, I hope the Bruins make it happen. I do. And I know from an outside perspective, someone like yourself or anyone else who views the Bruins, man, they're this wagon of a team. Taylor Hall. I cannot be overly confident. I am so goddamn nervous for this series. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so I guess from an outsider's perspective is there's no acclimation that needs to happen with this Bruins team. Like, this Bruins team has been continually making deep playoff runs. They're newly invigorated as a team that understands what it takes for a deep playoff run, how to get there. And they've been so close to winning so many times. I just can't see, regardless of who is coaching them and the systems in place, a very middling Islanders roster topple this Bruins team without an absolute miracle.
Oh, that's why they call him the Miracle, Barry Trotz. So we'll see.
The
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, we knew, Jesus. That could be another episode title. We knew with this playoff format, no matter what, the first round matchups were going to be interesting. And I think they over delivered. I mean, especially, Minnesota taking Vegas to Game 7, which we'll talk about, Winnipeg making things happen. But these second round matchups, like I said, Islanders, Bruins, Canes, Lightning, it's just going to be some goddamn dynamite hockey. And yeah, as a Bruins fan, I'm so nervous. So goddamn nervous for this series. And just fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed. Like I said, I hope the Bruins win. If I had to bet, I would say the Bruins win. But then again, I don't know. Maybe I should be more confident, right? Like, I thought that Cap series, maybe this will be what I thought that Cap series would be, a physical 7-game series. Maybe this will be it. But then if you were to sit here honestly and tell me the Bruins are going to win in 5, the Islanders are going to win in 5, I wouldn't call you crazy. I genuinely don't know how to read this. So
I don't know. I just know I'm a lot more excited for this series than I am for Habs Jets.
Well, that will bring us to our other North Division matchup that's still ongoing. Toronto and Montreal. And obviously here, 2 games have happened since we last recorded. Tuesday night, the Leafs took a 3-1 series lead, beating Montreal 4-0. Just a thrashing, if you will, but not really. I mean, Montreal had shot them, but Nylander, Spezza, Thornton, Galchenyuk, because of course Galchenyuk scored. And then last night, Montreal nearly blew it. It was 3-0. In one of, and I'll say this, I'm not saying this in a derogatory way towards either team, but legitimately one of the worst officiated games I have seen in my life in terms of the refs just letting everything go. That was the most, it's playoff hockey, playoff game I have seen in a long time. And we've already had some games that have been to that kind of standard this postseason. But again, 3-0 Habs. The Leafs battle back. I mean, Armia scored 2 goals in 3 minutes. Kotkaniemi made it 3-0. And then Hyman, Muzzin, and Muzzin again. Only for Nick Suzuki to win it 59 seconds into overtime. So you can't stop the Leafs from doing what the Leafs do, giving their fans hope and taking it away. Game 6 coming up. There will be fans in Montreal. I mean, Deej, it's obviously been an interesting run so far in terms of how this series has gone. I think Montreal, again, another team playing with house money. It goes to 6 games. They could very well push it to 7 because of the factor, the fan factor, essentially, of what might happen next and what impact. We've already seen the impact that having fans in the building can have. We've seen it in Nashville. We've seen it in that Florida series. I don't know what way this series goes. And I mean, obviously, there's always the what ifs. Like, oh, what if John Tavares didn't get hurt? And John Tavares was in the building for Game 5. He's already been seen back on the ice. Obviously, we won't see him in this series, but that storyline perhaps of does John Tavares come back if the Leafs make it to round 2? Certainly there. And obviously still just I say this in the most caring way possible. I don't care. I just hope his health is where it needs to be. Best wishes to John Tavares. But Deej, at this stage, I mean, how do you see this going before I go on a Carey Price tangent?
If the Habs win Game 6, do we see Tavares for Game 7? That's a great question.
If they allow him to rush back, if he is not 100% cleared, he cannot play. Like, you already know, right? Like, there's no injuries for Carolina, Tampa outside of Cedric Paquette. Those guys are hurt. It's playoff hockey. People are hurt. If it was a leg injury, sure. Steven Stamkos came back, scored a goal, and then sat out. Man, you cannot dick around in any way with a concussion scare like that, right? So certainly, I mean, it'll be debated for sure. I actually hope the Leafs win Game 6 because otherwise, I mean, my God, that's going to be the entire conversation is, does this man who suffered a horrifying concussion end up playing? But again, concussions are one of those weird things. You can look like you practically got murdered and be fine a few days later, whereas a minor incident can cost you your career. Like we've seen that in this sport specifically. So it's a tough call. Now, I'll say this, right? I'll say this because the narrative continues in terms of me being a Carey Price hater. It happened on stream last night. Now, I'll say this. Jack Campbell has a .944 save percentage in 5 games. Jack Campbell has been great. Carey Price has a .919. In saying that, Carey Price has been impressive. Carey Price has been Carey Price. This is what Carey Price is now. Allow me to say Carey Price one more time. A .919 save percentage through 5 games of a playoff round isn't necessarily the most impressive thing in the world because of how the playoffs work. And allow me to elaborate, where Carey Price has the 11th highest save percentage in the playoffs so far. There are 3 goalies. Sorokin. I don't know why I always struggle with that. I swear I heard the Russian pronunciation once upon a time. They said it wrong, and I've just carried it on. I apologize. But Sorokin, Rask, and Hellebuck. Hellebuck had a .950, for God's sakes. But then you have Grubauer, Vasilevsky, Nedeljkovic, Campbell, Talbot, Florian Saros, all ahead of him. The argument, of course, that you will hear, and actually, in fairness, I mean, even Spencer Knight and Craig Anderson, there's actually a lot of different save percentages that are higher than Carey Price's, but I left out the guys who only played like 2 games. The argument is that Habs fans will make is, well, the teams that they have that are above Carey Price are better than what Carey has in front of him on Montreal. Linus Ullmark had a higher save percentage than Carey Price in the regular season. I refuse to buy into the narrative that Montreal is this tire fire in front of Carey Price. I am not saying that they are great, but when you have guys a few years ago in Arizona before they were, even half decent, like Antti Ranta when he first got there had a great save percentage, and you can't tell me that team was better than Montreal. This year, Linus Ullmark, Jonathan Bernier having decent save percentages behind truly horrible teams. I don't buy into the narrative that the team in front of Carey Price is so bad that is the sole reason why he is not what he was 5-6 years ago. Carey Price is not consistently what he was when he was on arguably the best run of form in hockey history. Like, there was that time, 2011 to 2016, that Carey Price was maybe the best goalie of all time over a 5-year span. Like, you take Carey Price in that instance and compare him to Hasek's best 5-year run, I might take Carey Price. Genuinely might. If you were to argue, and we talked about how difficult it is for goalies to get into the Hall of Fame. If you wanted to argue that Carey Price was Hall of Fame caliber at that time, yeah. The problem is he's not that consistently anymore. And a lot of people just say it's because the team in front of him, and it's not. There have been injuries, natural decline for a 33-year-old goalie. He's not that anymore. But what we have seen, and I've praised him as playoff Price, what we've seen is that he still has that ability. He just can't tap into it consistently. He has made some fantastic saves from point-blank range as well in this series. But that's the problem. He makes those gigantic saves. You're like, oh my God, he's still Carey Price. And then he lets in a turd. That's just what he is at this point. Carey Price, when he's on his best, is still probably top 3, no discussion. Top 5 minimum. He just doesn't tap into his best at this point. And people like to blame the team in front of him. I don't buy that. That said, all that to build up. Can Montreal win this series? Can Carey Price steal this series still? Absolutely. He absolutely can. So for as much as me downplaying what people view as the big issue for Carey Price's drop in play, I still think he has that ability to steal this. And I think you're right, DeJ. If they win Game 6, I think Montreal takes this series. this game on Saturday, I mean, again, it's 2 games on Saturday. Game 6, Leafs, Habs, and then Game 1, Islanders, Bruins. Like, that's it. The Leafs have to. They had a chance in Game 5. They blew it in overtime. The Leafs have to get this done. You talk about Carolina against Tampa. Almost. Well, now's the time. You need to make that jump. For the Leafs right now, you have to beat Montreal in this series. And if you let it go 7, I'd place a bet on Montreal in Game 7. I would. Like, at that point, like, especially you talk about the stress levels and the mental gymnastics of it. If the Leafs do go to 7, what that locker room's going to be feeling. Like, man, I get the idea of, well, Spezza and Thornton and Simmons, and they might be able to settle everybody down. But, man, that type of failure over and over again can really, I guess the term would be ruin a team mentally. So that whole tangent aside, Deej, I mean, I guess your thoughts on this point, because I know I mentioned a lot there, and I had to bring up the Carey Price argument again, but like I said, I got a lot of it last night on stream. Your thoughts at this point as this series heads to 6?
So in my personal notes for this series, I jotted down one very interesting stat that really stood out to me when I look at both these teams. Rocket Richard winner Austin Matthews has taken 25 shots on Carey Price and scored once in this series. The reason Toronto is scoring in this series, and the reason Montreal has been able to stay in it, is if you look at who's scoring goals for Toronto, there's only 3 players that have scored more than 1 in this series, and it's William Nylander, Jake Muzzin, who got those 2 back-to-backs, and then Jason Spezza has 2. The top elite line, I mean, I don't even know how they're dividing their lines right now with Tavares gone. But
so to answer that, the top line on Cap Friendly is listed as Hyman, Matthews, Marner. There are 2 goals, 1 for Hyman, 1 for Matthews. Second line is Galchenyuk, Kerfoot, and Nylander, which, I mean, 4 points, 5 points, 7 points. I will say Matthews and Marner each have 4 points, but to your point there, I mean, William Nylander has as many goals in this series as Kerfoot, Galchenyuk, Matthews, and Hyman combined.
And you can even add Marner to that list because he hasn't scored.
Yeah.
So it's just nuts to me that you have Austin Matthews, the absolute best goal scorer in the world right now.
Yes.
And I can't stress right now enough. Send the hate mails somewhere where no one will read it.
Send it to Novokuznetsk, where no one's going to listen.
What's interesting, though, is this very much supports the theory that you just made about Carey Price, where Carey Price makes awesome saves and then the garbage goes in. Whenever Austin Matthews has the puck, Carey Price has stopped it 96% of the time in this series. So it's really interesting to me that, like you said, Carey Price shows up in the big moments, but then he lets in turds. And it reflects on the Maple Leaf score sheet. Like obviously correlation, not causation, whatever. But I mean, what other, you either say that the Tavares injury combined with this first round curse is getting to the head of the Leafs, or that Carey Price can show up big in the big moments, make the acrobatic highlight reel saves, and then just kind of miss an easy one. And it's just really interesting to me to see Austin Matthews with only 1 goal in this series. And that, when I sat down, I looked in the stats because I've watched most of these games, but I've never just sat down and watched a whole game from this series because, the Panthers have been playing on the same schedule. When I saw that Matthews miraculously only has 1 goal in this series, I was just absolutely blown away. He's the Richard winner. He's the best goal scorer in the world right now, and he can only get 1. So
the thought is then, right, at least what comes to mind for me, he had that wrist injury. How healthy is Austin Matthews?
I think he's fine because he was still, even after the 3 games where he had that wrist injury and he wasn't scoring, and we mentioned it, he found other ways to score, and then he quickly returned to form. There is a reason he won the Richard. Otherwise, he would have been passed. It's not like he had a huge lead when he got hurt, you know?
It's fair. But, I mean, there could have been a tweak at some point towards the end of the season, beginning
That's
of the
true.
playoffs.
Maybe he was playing through something.
Pure speculation, of course, but obviously that thought is there when you have, like you said, obviously, Alex Ovechkin going to go down in the history books as probably the greatest goal scorer of all time. If he doesn't make it and beat the record, he's still the greatest goal scorer of all time to me. Talk about the era, talk about the time missed that wasn't necessarily his fault. It is what it is. For Austin Matthews to just kind of get, stonewalled like this, I mean, yeah, it definitely raises that question of, is it just bad luck? Is he maybe slightly hurt? Is it just Carey Price stopping all the good shots? So it's a really interesting situation to see how it plays out, because obviously last year, and again, people think I hate Carey Price. I really like Carey Price, like as a human being, as a goalie, but numbers are numbers. It is what it is. At the end of the day, though, Carey Price stole the series last year too. Like, we can look at Montreal and say, yeah, no, it's not the best roster in the world, but just because it's the best roster in the world doesn't mean that excuses a goaltender. Like, John Gibson played behind a historically bad Anaheim team. He also wasn't great. Like I said, that's why I'll always bring up the Linus Allmarks of the world, the Jonathan Berniers of the world. Just because you're on a bad team doesn't mean that automatically then, like you said, correlation, not causation, doesn't mean that automatically your numbers are bad too as a goalie. That doesn't always mean that. Carey Price, though, single-handedly stole a round last year in the play-in. He could do it again here. And, I mean, talk about pressure. A lot of pressure on Jack Campbell right now as well. Like, he's playing really well, and it's clear, like, he's the guy. And, not only is it pressure on him leading a team into the playoffs for the first time, essentially, it's pressure on him because he is having to follow up Freddie Anderson's shortcomings. And it's unfair to say it, but James Reimer's shortcomings as well, where this team over the last decade obviously has those history, the history of collapses at this stage. So there is a lot of pressure on Jack Campbell to essentially bail out the team in front of him if they can't get it done themselves. And whether or not he's able to do that, I mean, we don't know. Again, Jack Campbell over the past 3 years has begun to live up to the potential that he had as a former first-round pick with Dallas back in the day. But, man, that is a lot of pressure to put on your shoulders of, here's what's happened to this team in the last 10 years. Here is an original six franchise that hasn't won in oh so long. And here's what's happened recently. Here are the memories that people have of, we get Boston into elimination situations and we lay an egg. And now here you go. You're in a situation where you have Montreal in an elimination setup. And it's, all right, not the best game in Game 5. On the road in Game 6. Potentially going home for Game 7. There's a lot of pressure on the entire team at this stage, because obviously this is the team that was supposed to get it done. This is the team that's supposed to be, at the very least, get out of round 1. Montreal's playing with house money. I mean, especially if you're on the side of the fan base saying, well, we're not that good, we suck, and this, that, and the other, and Carey would be better if this, and the team. All right, sure. If we're going to take those complaints at face value, then you guys are playing with house money. You have as little of a shot as Winnipeg did, apparently. I don't believe that, personally, but I mean, yeah. Montreal has a puncher's chance in the series because they have somebody in goal who was, at a time, the best goalie of all time, who still can show those flashes of brilliance. I get Shea Weber's not what he used to be, but is Shea Weber abysmal? No, not in my opinion. Jeff Petry's not as hot as he was at the beginning of the season when Deej and I were saying, shit, is he going to be a Norris candidate? Like, this team isn't brutal. There are some X factors, the coaching for sure. I have no idea what the hell is going on. And I actually got into not a Twitter argument with Urinating Tree, but, he mentioned Dom Ducharme not being able to be the coach moving forward. I don't know how much control Dom Ducharme has, especially after, Deej, we undersold this, the walkie-talkie incident. where essentially, it was Marc Bergevin saying, hey, challenge this. How much control does Dom Ducharme have? Because it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. And again, this is just pointless speculation, but the idea of not playing the young guys, I could buy that was a Bergevin decision. Especially with how Bergevin's been willing to move on from younger players and not necessarily trust younger players. And obviously, wow, what a decision it was to play Caulfield and to play Suzuki. Suzuki got the game winner in Game 5 in overtime. So there's just a lot of unanswered questions surrounding Montreal. And regardless, you talk about the post-mortems, right, that we've done, breaking down what happened for teams, what's happening moving forward. Regardless of who we get to talk about, it would have happened by this time next week for Toronto or Montreal, whoever gets bounced in the first round. That is going to be some fun speculation of what could happen moving forward, Deej.
Yeah. Can you imagine still using a walkie-talkie in 2021? It's just like it's just so funny to me. Like, there's so many better ways. Just using a walkie-talkie like he's a security guard. So yeah, I don't know. This is a fascinating series. I'm looking forward to Game 6. And it's like you said, if this goes 7, all of a sudden this isn't just the Leafs versus the Habs like Game 6 is. Game 7 is the Leafs versus the Habs and versus their own self-doubt versus all those memories coming up of being one of the best teams in the league and somehow just magically vexed and cursed to not get out of this first round.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a Game 7 is a significantly harder win for them than the Game 6 is my...
Fair enough.
That's my bow. That's the bow I'm putting on it.
So we'll move on then
to the weirdest series.
Our final series to discuss. That being Vegas and Minnesota, which is probably, funny enough, the series that we have the least to talk about right now. Game 7 is tonight. By the time this podcast comes out, it might have already concluded. Minnesota wins Game 6 3-0 on home ice to force Game 7. A game in which it was close. I mean, in terms of the shots, like we've seen some lopsided situations here, but 3 third-period goals, Hartman, Fiala, and, of course, Nick Bjugstad scoring the third goal of that game.
The man scored on a breakaway for the first time in his life. There's so many times I've seen that guy miss on breakaways. I was just like, suddenly I saw this happen, and I was like, does bag skating work again? Is it 1970?
So with this series, Deej, I mean, we said at the start that this could be incredibly close because of how well Minnesota played Vegas and have played Vegas throughout Vegas's entire history in the league so far. And here we are. Now, I thought Vegas would win this in 6 on the bracket challenge. I still think Vegas is the favorite to win it in 7. But the key word here, I mean, God, house money could have been the name of the episode because, yeah, you talk about Winnipeg, you get a puncher's chance. You talk about Montreal, you probably have better than a puncher's chance, right? Like there are a bunch of these series where there was a clear favorite, but you don't necessarily rule out anybody being able to win. I'd say Winnipeg and Nashville were the 2 teams that were doubted the most. For Minnesota, I mean, playing with house money heading into Game 7. Why? They had a great regular season. Nobody expected them to be this good. I mean, I remember the season preview, and I said Minnesota's like on the bubble with like Arizona to maybe make it because we don't know the Kaprizov effect and the Bill Guerin changes so far. We'll see. They have this good of a year, and they take a team to 7 where you talk about the pressure and the mental aspect of the game for Toronto. For Vegas, it is amplified because Vegas absolutely has that pressure on their shoulders of you are expected bare minimum to make it to the second round. And if you lose to Colorado, well, you lost to another juggernaut team. Like both of those teams, again, have those expectations of cup or bust, essentially. And the only way that blow is softened is if you lose to another cup or bust team. If you lose to Minnesota, who, have gone from that reputation of they'll make the first round and get bounced to making some of the changes, you get Kaprizov in there from the KHL. I mean, all the pressure in the world on Vegas right now heading into tonight.
It's interesting you say playing with house money for Minnesota, especially because this team has about $19 million in players that have severely underperformed coming off the books this year, on top of having 2 first-round picks, 2 third-round picks this year. My God. What a fun team to be the general manager of right now. Yeah. If I'm Bill Guerin, holy cow. And in a weird way, I think Vegas's frustration at this point, because it's Minnesota. Who's on this team? Look at their top scorers. There's nobody on this team with more than 3 points in this series. It's crazy. If I'm Vegas, I'm so mad that this is going to Game 7. This is a series where Zach Parise is 4th in scoring because he has 2 points in the 3 games he's played. Matt Dumba is the scoring leader for the Wild with a goal and 2 assists. This is just...
I'll say this.
I don't know how they're winning.
I know how they're winning.
Oh, the answer is the man as Alabama man himself, Cam Talbot. I
said playoff price. Playoff Talbot is a thing and has been for a while. His first ever playoff appearance, he had 2 games with the Rangers back in 13-14, tossed those out. Cam Talbot has essentially made the playoffs 3 times. 16-17 with Edmonton, 13 games, a 924. Last year he made the playoffs with Calgary, 10 games, a 924. This year so far, 6 games, a 937. People kind of, and myself included, looked at Cam Talbot and it's maybe in Minnesota it'll work, but Cam Talbot, Alabama man, is a big-time playoff performer. And it's a good thing they have him, too, because Kaapo Kähkönen in the regular season was pretty solid. He started off really hot and then tailed off by the end. If you look at the analytical side for Kaapo Kähkönen, it wasn't that great. Minnesota's not here without Cam Talbot. God help them if they kept Devin Dubnyk. My God, you would be nowhere close to where you are right now.
And that Devin Dubnyk $2 million comes off the books this offseason. Just more Guerin money.
They have draft picks. They have cap space. I do believe. Kaprizov will get paid for sure. But even in terms of the prospect pool that they have, we've talked about him a lot this year. We were supposed to see Marco Rossi, and we never got to see him this year. In terms of other prospects as well, someone like Adam Beckman in the WHL at center. On the wing, Matt Boldy, who they just signed, that people are clamoring to get playoff time as well. Defensively, too, Philip Johansson is up there. Marshall Warren is up there. Of course, they got Kalen Addison in this Jason Zucker deal. And then in goal, not only did they have Kaapo Kähkönen, but they also have Hunter Jones. I'm not sure if he's still with the Peterborough Petes. I think he is. I know he signed his ELC, but another promising goaltender out of the O. I actually think he played with Iowa this year, but they already have pieces in place. If Bill Guerin, to continue the puns here, if Bill Guerin plays his cards right, this isn't an aberration. This is the start of something for the Minnesota Wild. The problem is for Vegas, you can't lose to the start of something. This is, depending on what happens, this could be the type of loss for the Vegas Golden Knights that leads them to do something stupid. Because we have seen that time and time again in the playoffs. You have a cup contending team, but you fall short or way short of where you thought you would be. And obviously, the 2011 Canucks are brought up a lot of, man, they were 1 game short, and then they tried to change their entire identity. We've seen it before with other teams where you fall short and you can end up doing something stupid that completely derails your team. On the flip side, there were positives. Like the Tampa Bay Lightning after the Columbus incident, they didn't overreact, and they said, settle the hell down, and then look what happens. They, end up getting the job done the next year. It is I am nervous as hell tonight if I'm a member of the Vegas, a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights. If I'm a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, this is, I'm not going to say the biggest game in their team history because obviously they made it to the Stanley Cup final, but I mean, you talk about a team that's had multiple different turning points. The choose your own adventure, take a left, take a right. Obviously, you go to the draft and you think, okay, we probably won't be a playoff team. We'll stock up on prospects. Oh, crap, we got handed this team. All right, screw the prospects. We're going this way. They've had a couple of those moments already. Do we keep Fleury or trade? Do we trade Fleury? And okay, we kept Fleury. Oh, good decision. You lose here. You take a right. You end up in the pit instead of being like, oh, okay, cool. Now continue on your road. Turns out it was just a left turn to take the right turn that you wanted to get to. This is huge. And for Minnesota, I'm sorry, there's no pressure here. And there might be nothing more dangerous than a team that's just if we win, fantastic. If we lose, well, we put up as good of a fight as we could have. So, man, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm so excited for Game 7 tonight because it's always interesting to see how a team that's expected to be great handles the pressure of having to be great.
Well, I got a feeling Cam Talbot's going to show up tonight. And in honor of that, if you are not already a Cam Talbot fan, let me share with you a fact from his Wikipedia. So Talbot claims to be very uncreative, which I guess led to some problems when he was trying to design a goalie mask. So I guess David Gunnarsson is a famous goalie mask artist. He was asking Talbot for ideas, to which Talbot responded, he kind of lived down the street from where they filmed Ghostbusters. So he told Gunnarsson to put some characters from the film on the mask.
How can you not love Cam Talbot?
Lived down the street from where they filmed Ghostbusters, and that's the only thing he could think of to have them put on his mask.
How many people just learned that parts, if not all, of Ghostbusters was filmed in Alabama?
Right? I guess this is when he played for the Rangers, which makes it even funnier. So it's not like they were filming Ghostbusters while he was there.
Is he talking? See, that's the question. Are you talking the original or some of the remakes?
Oh, we're talking the original. He probably saw a plaque once. It just gets funnier the more you look into this.
Oh, God.
It's just yeah, they filmed Ghostbusters there 30 years ago.
Put it on the mask. Cam, the Alabama man.
Oh, yes, we Cam, as the Flames put out shirts last year.
God, so many potential episode titles. Which one is Deej going to pick? Don't worry. You would have found out by the time you hear this part of the podcast. Deej, with that, I think we're done. I mean, so much to talk about. As always, it keeps going.
Well,
we didn't even get into our fishing adventures.
Yeah, well, first of all, we'll do a little preview for next week's episode, Wicked Tougna, episode 2. We'll figure out how to catch a pufferfish with a treble hook without breaking your local laws and ordinances. And number 2, we'll do a very light, blurby preview of the NHL Draft Lottery, where the NHL attempts to make their balls not look rigged. Now, listen, if you want to be like the NHL, if you want to make your balls not look rigged, you can use Tougie. Code Tougie. That's Tougie for 20% off at manscaped.com. Don't have people publicly questioning your balls and why they went to New York on public forums. You can use code Tougie for 20% off at manscaped.com. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. Tougie's Take has been a DeJ Audio podcast. DeJ Audio, you're listening to it. Let's hear that new intro one more time.
Women want me, fish fear me, baby. If you're headed to the kitchen, could you fear me? Women want me,
Could you fear me?
Fish fear me, just tapping on the glass on the
Good night, fishing buddies.